do have plans for a series of events over the at least the next 2 years on art and complexity. And I'd like this to be, as I said, the start of this dialogue that in one sense has been going on for the past 2 days, but I now want us more to face each other and say, okay, what do you mean by this, or can we consider that from the artist to the scientist, vice versa, and everybody else included? So to get us started, I asked the speakers if they could think of at least one question to at least one other speaker, just to get the ball rolling.
Evolution is a main feature of complexity. Among different meanings of evolution, most of the time, in what I heard, referred to evolutionary algorithms, genetic algorithms, artificial mind paradigms. My question is for the speakers who are using such paradigms, do you really think or believe that such genetic processes are able, by themselves, to generate sensorial and or sensible phenomena, sounds and motions, for example, without any arbitrary external interpretation? And if not, by whom? Who is the nested demon, the artist, as a mediator, a passing person between genes and senses?
Gosh.
Next question.
Nobody to answer that? All right, next question.
Oh, she's got another one, she?
There is a similar question about it. If you make if you make a statement in a forest in which your wife is not present, are you still around?
In her eyes, yes. Well, I think I understand this question. What this question is asking is genetic information enough, or does the impact of the environment and experience important in the genetic processes? And that's the question.
Can you answer it?
Yeah, my answer is yes.
Yes, too.
I think the point she's making is that if you just use these evolutionary approaches without specifying what's happening to the environment, then something's missing in that approach. I think that's the point.
I think this is typical in general for the evolutionary models. Typical evolutionary models now considers the environment as a fundamental variable.
I think it must be, doesn't it?
So Annie will be very pleased to hear that.
Can I ask Luke if what work you did with Cecil Thomas? Did she make you a opinion?
Right. So Cecil Thomas is an artist interested in smell. And so this was for the Contemporary Art Museum of Berlin. And so what she did was she gave to a number of people, including myself, a particular smell. And we didn't know what it was. And then the idea was to react to it, to find out what it was. And I couldn't make it out at all. I mean, Cecil also, she has a real lab in her apartment in Berlin. She has all the equipment to measure smells and to then synthesize them. And so she makes smells of areas and, so she uses smell. So anyway, and then I lived for, I think, 2 months with this smell. All the time, trying to find out what it was. And go in shops, actually, smelling things.
What do you mean with what it was? This is to see the origin, the original product, to see what...
If you get the smell out of context.
Was it an organic smell or was it a very synthetic smell?
Well, I didn't know.
When you first smelled it,
I thought it was organic.
Yeah, was it similar to anything in particular, or?
But you see, this was the thing. I mean, then I thought it was this, and I was thrown out of the shops actually. Smelling.
You were sniffing it.
Sniffing. I went out in the countryside.
What kind of soul
slide for it. Honestly, this is just floor. This is floor.
No, I have the text. You wrote the text. You wrote the text describing. And then in the gallery, in the museum, she had two walls which were covered with this smell. So you walked in the space, and if you scratched it, you had the smell. And then there were a number of people who reacted to that smell. Now, it turned out, should I disclose the smell?
Yes.
So, it turned out there was the smell of money.
There was this famous studies of
coins.
Yeah, money doesn't smell, right?
No, but there's also famous studies of that Hungarian scholar near Freud, who said that pecunia olet, in that case, in his study says that in dreams of person, typically pecunia, in that case, olet, it smells of money. So there was a sort of figurative interpretation of the metaphor.
But the interesting thing there, again, I mean, this is almost like a cognitive science project, right? Because if you take smell out of context, I mean, and then you try to connect it up to the world, it's extremely disturbing experience.
But once you knew it was money, could you tell? I mean, did you go and sniff the urine?
Yeah, of course. Try to smell money.
Yeah, but it's a different. I wish you had brought it up because I think the whole idea of smell within the art complexity was another kind of level for us to have talked about. And when we worked with Sissel in London, she made us a perfume called Dirty, and you can see that she in order to make the perfume, she borrowed our dog, which she wanted originally to have a video camera inserted surgically into its nose, and I drew the line at that, which actually we'll come back to that in 1 second. And then she took the dog for a walk in the neighborhood, and of course it was smelling shit and urine and garbage, as that's what dogs want to smell. And so it's on the camera, and so that was then played back in the gallery, and then from that tour, she made perfume of the locality. But it was quite an interesting kind of complex thing because the dog is controlling in a completely different way than you or I would do. I mean, it might sniff the flowers or it might sniff the money, but you're not going to follow the dog's path, let's put it like that. But what I thought was very interesting, and it comes back in a way to the question of artists and scientists and our responsibilities, is obviously I would not have offered any dog for her to insert a camera into its nose because the dog cannot give consent in that situation. It would have required general anesthesia, obviously a lot of pain, and as an artist, I'm really not interested in situations where there is this kind of negative element. But obviously in science, we have many instances of using animals, someone yesterday was talking about, well, it was even your talk about whether robots should harm humanity. It's about a responsibility for that we make, whether it's art or science.
We actually have been talking about artificial nose to make a link to complexity. There's theories of smell, the olfactory bulb and everything, which actually this guy in Berkeley, his name slips my mind, who argues that it's a chaotic system.
What is the olfactory system?
Yes, the neural system that is for recognizing smells. It has many states, and that's another subject. But may I ask you?
Yes, please.
It's not
There is somebody in London, you can meet her. Her name is Jo Bingley, and she's one of the specialists in the olfactory system. And indeed, the properties of the olfactory systems are very different from the other systems. If you smell two smells at a time, you never discuss a composite of two smells, of that two smells. It would be a completely different smell with no relation whatsoever with any of them. Because essentially what it is just combinatoric. There are a few hundred receptors for different chemicals in the nose. And then according to how much this molecule of that smell binds to each of them, you have a certain characterization of that thing. And it's unique for each thing. You cannot extrapolate, you cannot consider superpositions. So in this category, it's a very difficult system.
So each one is distinct. We identify it as a distinct...
Distinct and not related, yes, this is the point.
So if you're cooking and you have different spices, but you feel like, oh, I smell the cumin.
If they are introduced to your nose in a sequence, then what happens is that the one which was perceived before, after some time you become not sensitive to it, so you introduce a new one, you will recognize a new one as it is. However, if you introduce two smells at the same time, then you will not recognize any of them as part of the common smell. That's a very strong, well-established.
And you're saying that you can't combine with them. You know, that this plus this makes
This
it.
is a completely other thing, and as a rule, you can never infer from multiple things.
That's interesting. Give us your question first.
I'm very sorry, I don't want to know. So, in terms of art and science, you know, and this goes back also to your comment earlier. I think it's extremely important that the voice of the artist. And so the artists are not used to speaking with transparencies, so that doesn't work very well. So you need to find a way. Of course, they're used to putting things in the gallery and showing in their way, and often they're not very good in talking about it. In fact, someone like Maurice Foucault, for example, completely refuses to talk about this work, even though
There's always an answer to the problem.
yeah, and so even in this, a small group, we might stop you to say things, but so what I would recommend method is to find to bridge the gap. We have to not organize conferences like this one, but have other kinds of dialogues.
That's exactly what we want to do in this case. Go on.
I think that this technique which we are using in interdisciplinary scientific research, having young students come, because they are still at the stage they can learn a new language, so they can be bilingual. We have already experienced with people which are both biologists and physicists, or both mathematicians and economists. So in principle, if you start with people who are just starting their PhDs or something like that, then and if you find a framework which would accept them to make their degrees in such an interdisciplinary framework, then it would be very interesting of how they would look like.
Because that's what we're planning, to have a series of workshops. So I hope you come and bring some of your...
But in any case, if the dialogue between sciences and us should be two-way dialogue, in that case, it's sure that as a scientist, one has to listen to what the artist, not what the artist says, but to see what the artist is doing. But in any case, also the artist should understand what science does in terms of its typical practice of reading and discussing in terms of science. You have to do.
It might be that for maybe you are much younger than I am, but for some of us it's a little bit too late to really get steeped genuinely into that culture in a very total way. So the real thing which we could do is to exchange young students. And in this respect, I would be interested. You see, I know exactly how it person and transform it into something.
No, the thing that what I would say is that you cannot teach anyone to be an artist.
No.
They are or they're not. You can help them develop their
In the zero approximation, that's true for science.
Sure, yeah, sure. But the super philosophy, you cannot, it's a Kantian argument.
So
you
let's
cannot
assume,
become a philosopher.
so let's assume that
you can understand the story of philosophy.
Yeah.
That's right.
But it's still very important if you have a good teacher or a bad teacher.
Sure, and the thing that one has to recognize is that, again, at different levels, you teach people first history, because you need that as a history. In some ways, we should also be teaching history of science, which I think a lot of scientists are not even aware of, or even the philosophy of science. Sometimes I'm quite surprised people are not so aware of. And there's power structures inherent within that discourse. But then there are the technical skills, which would be an artist. But then, more importantly, what I teach on the level that I'm doing with students is conceptual skills, which is to say what is. Matteo spoke about finding his voice and not his voice not getting lost in complexity and not trying to take over science so much that he lost his voice. The job that I have is to help my students find their voice, which is they obviously want to say something. That's why they're artists, but they don't necessarily know how to say it. And it's not about technical skills; it's about conceptual skills, and in a way that is very similar to a scientific thing, in that you need to be able to think through what it is that you are doing as an artist, and more the conceptual skills which we are trying to teach enable us to have a discussion. And a lot of younger artists are actually able, maybe not to speak about science per se, but speak in a way that is clear and understand and actually speak about their art, whereas some of the older artists actually say, equally, I refuse. I will not talk about my art. In the same way that you might have a scientist say, no, I won't talk that. I won't come this way, and then I won't go this way. But younger artists, in a way, and younger scientists are exactly the ones who will be able to come together, I think.
Yeah, but just a minute, because if Soren says it's too late for those of us who are older, and you're saying it's conceptual, surely as long as you are open to at least explore another perspective, it is never too late. And that all of us, as long as we are open, as I said, for that exploration, we can always see that other point of view. We may not become artists, we may not become fully fledged scientists, but that doesn't mean that we cannot see from that perspective.
Yeah, and I worry about, I hear this too, somehow the idea that as you get older you get set and
Yes.
you can't change. And that, I think that is what is slowing the progress down too.
This is not, by the way, what I meant. In fact, I always surprised again and again how much our students are much more conservative in thinking than us. And I haven't understand even why, because I was there when some of the basic ideas were invented. I know that guy, I know that he's not good and he might have been wrong, where the students took it as a part of the living truth existence, and they are much more reluctant to challenge it. So my point was not from the point of view of our motivation. It was just simply stating something which is known in biology. If somebody doesn't learn how to speak until the age of 12, one cannot speak. Or if you go in a country and if after the age of 25 and you try to learn that language, you'll never think in that language as a mother language. So I'm not saying that we are not prepared to accept everything. I'm not even saying that we are not going to be able to speak that other language. But we'll have always a foreign accent. And having a foreign accent in art is probably killing.
It's possible, but I wanted to mention, to bring up something on this too, because I think to teach, to learn, to teach, to somehow be exposed to creative thinking, whether you're a scientist or artist or anything else, is, I think all you can do is, let's say if you're a teacher, is expose people I do this with artists and scientists, expose them to a lot of different ideas. I can't say this is important, you should know this, you need to merge the art and the science. You just throw out all the ideas, and then you see where the lights go on. And, you know, people, I think, have this innate sense. I mean, it happened to me too. I said, I need to know about science because I saw something and this is really important to how I think. And no one said, you've got to learn now about science as an artist, it's going to be important for you. So I think I've learned to never force people, to just throw out ideas and then watch for the little creative sparks. And then they go ahead and they'll start learning. You know, they'll learn what they need to know, whether they're artists or scientists. And I've seen it with scientists who were, for the first time, exposed to art in a more deep way. And they go, yes. And, you know, they go ahead and they want to learn. They talk to artists. They go to galleries. They learn more about it. So it's nothing that can be forced. I think it's in a lot of us. And it's just that it never, somehow we've never been in a situation to let it come out. And that's because disciplines are so strict that, you know, the scientists only get to learn about the science and never really get to learn the arts. And artists, vice versa. I mean, when I was in art school, I tried to learn computers, and they said, no, artists don't work with computers. You can't be an artist and work with computers. That's wrong. And, you know, this is still going on in education, too. And I think that's really restricted.
Yeah, about creativity, I definitely agree with you that the problem is not so much having or not having creativity, but stopping or not stopping the creativity which all of us have. And in this respect, we even had a research and an article which got actually published in Science, in which just very simple algorithms led to creative ideas which after that were evaluated by persons and got higher marks than ideas which were on the same team produced by persons. And definitely, of course, it's not that the computer was more intelligent, it's just that the computer didn't have any editions which normal people have. So yes, I agree with that. But I'm asking about, I was asking about the professional part of being an artist, and I was asking you because you were emphasizing so convincingly that it's a profession. It's not that you just go there.
It's not a game. No, and it's funny. We had a bit of discussion along the lines a little bit earlier, in that I felt that this conference there was maybe one or two moments that we spoke the language of art. That pretty much the whole of this conference was the language of science, and it was about art trying to come into that and make you understand a little bit about where we speak. I felt there wasn't really the room, the space for the way we speak to come across. And I don't think that's a good or a bad thing. It's just like it does happen a lot in these kind of conferences. But in this particular one, I think it's a very out of balance because there were three or maybe four artists, and there weren't even people from the art world like galleries or curators or critics who might also add a different viewpoint. But absolutely, if you are going to be a professional artist, if you are going to show more than, if it's not a game, if it's not therapy, then absolutely you work at it. Someone yesterday was quite surprised when an artist said, "What I do is research. It is pure research. We are doing pure research." It's just very different.
In the last years, it was when one follows the flow of ideas, it's as rigorous and as focused as a scientist.
That's a good question. When you said like this language of art and language of science and technology, do you find that complexity science is possibly a vocabulary that can in some ways help bridge that language gap? You work with a bit of art and complexity, you found that helps?
Yeah, it can. Because for a start, in science, it's complexity. The whole idea was breaking down the barriers between the sciences. Of course, that makes it further. So people are just generally more open to the ideas. So yeah, I do think it's a good way to bridge, certainly to bridge the gap between art and science. For me, it's the most intelligent bridge in a way. But I wanted to turn that question around a bit and say, we've all talked about how great it is to have the dialogue between art and complexity, or art and science, and how it's great. But what are the pitfalls from the scientific point of view? Because I talked yesterday about what the pitfalls were from an artistic point of view. Is the fact that you can lose your voice and you can lose what you want to say because you get swallowed up in the world of fact and proofs and theory. So, but what's the pitfall from the scientific point of view? Jeff?
Like a rigor.
Sorry, what is it?
I perceive like a rigor that the scientific community has a shared value system to do with rigor in the way that things are done, and clearly that's not the way that things are done in the art world. And so the establishment is not happy to have anything that doesn't fit these very narrow canons which is establishing itself. So the danger is that scientists who leave the safety of the nest will then do work which is not recognized by the community.
You see, the recognition in the art circles, maybe I'm wrong, but the way I imagine it, it depends on the public, on the consumer. In a scientific career, you depend on your peers. In your case, I don't suppose that you're buying advice from your one of your colleagues.
If you can't impress your peers, you therefore can't
display your work. It's much worse than impressing them. You get promoted from one stage to another in the academic world by the guys in your department writing letters to people which are the best guys in your field in some university, and if the guy say, oh, I hate his guts because he said something against my work, that's still alright. If he says, I never heard about this guy, then you're dead.
Yeah, that's true in art too, because I mean, sometimes you need the critics, you've got the curators, even to expose your work to the public. Often you need some sort of people in authority or other peers who are successful select and say, yes, that's a good artist, let's put them in the show, you know, whether it's peers or curators or critics or people in some kind of an authority. So I think sometimes you can bypass that by just putting it out to the public, and the public likes it so much that the authority, like the critics, have to just say, oops, I guess this actually is good. But I think there is that same kind of standard. I mean, you know, I'm in a university, to get tenure as an artist is the same type of system that scientists would have to go to get, you know, you have to show work in important places that are acknowledged in the field to be important places. So it's really, I see it's a very similar kind of thing.
In university?
Yeah.
But shouldn't we,
Yes.
Why am I in a university?
No, this is what I mean. For you, indeed, you can understand what are we risking if we do things with.
But I mean, there's artists in universities. I mean, there's Chris Byrne. There's fine artists that do painting, traditional work, traditional art. And I'm part of a school of arts and architecture. So these are traditional artists in their research. The way you have publications, it's the exact same thing. You have exhibitions, and if you don't have exhibitions in well-established, places that are accepted in your field to be top places, then you don't get tenure, for instance. So even if your research is the fine art, then it could be painting. It doesn't have to be technology or anything.
But that's just playing the game which perpetuates the game.
Yeah.
And I think in one sense what complexity does by being almost a fresh new way of seeing things, it can almost be the thing that perhaps flips all that. And I think that we need to do it. We need to stand and say it is not just the traditional way of doing things. We really do need to do them differently.
Come up with another system. Because ultimately somebody needs to sort of judge it or say, yes, this is good and that isn't as good.
But then you have to build that community to see from a different perspective. And I think we're doing that. But anyway, I'd like to ask some of the speakers that have not asked a question yet if they have something to raise. Francois?
No, more confused, I guess.
That's complexity.
Well, I mean, we can always make a revolution, change the system, change people, use that at all. I think the only thing that can change something is the work of art that would, be inspired possibly by complexity, and that suddenly has a lot of success. At least we cannot predict, we cannot do anything with that. It happens or not.
But we can try, can't we?
I mean, if you're an artist, you can try this, but I'm not sure we can prescribe or, otherwise it looks like a bit of wishful thinking or hand waving or let's do. But I mean, it's not going to happen.
I agree with
Unless
that.
someone who does it, we don't know who it is.
Not only that, but
When I said there was danger, what I meant was there was a danger. From a scientist's point of view, you can't science is science. I think what happens to your employment, that's tough. That's the sacrifice you make to be the research is the science of the art you do. That's what you do. But I think, having said that, they clearly are different. So moving outside, I'm a mathematician. It's a very strong poetry background. If you do things in a certain way, and if you don't do it in that way, it's useless. And certainly this sort of inductive divergent thinking is absolutely not acceptable. It's got to be one thing after another.
But then you take like quantum physics or something where people said, no, that's wrong. That isn't the accepted way to do it. That's not science. That's not right. I mean, isn't any new frontier like complexity science?
I think you find that the quantum physics is a very strong value system. But I mean, the point I'm making is not particular, but it is that we're all on a voyage of discovery of some sort of level. The danger is that we lose our way, which is exactly what you said. So we get what we might consider to turn out to be distracted by a lot of effort into trying to think of this strange new area, which is not productive. That's the risk.
I think the thing that you said about the fear of artists not working in a rigorous way, if I remember, or at least the language is.
I don't believe that. People say that.
Yeah, people say that, yes, and it is that whole notion that what I do is not rigorous, and that is kind of a mythology. And so, yes, I actually think these kind of discussions are good at getting people from both sides to understand each other, because maybe the way that my rigor works is in a totally different way than yours, and then it's also about you trying to understand how I apply what you would call rigor to the things that I do. Equally, Justice Conference is the sort of thing where, I've done something that I don't usually do, which is make work that's quite messy. I'm an incredibly messy person in my life. My artwork is incredibly precise. And I was explaining that by using the tape, it was about trying to engage with the scientific community in this conference, because anybody can tear a piece of tape and put a piece of string, and you don't feel that you're making an aesthetic action. And so then you don't feel inhibited, and actually people generally didn't feel inhibited, and they did put up strings. And for me, it makes me cringe to see this torn tape, because it's so unattractive and so unaesthetic, and it's really not the way that I do things. And so for me, it was actually quite a good thing to do this, because it was a chance to experiment and push myself out of the way of making that I normally make.
Even if you avoid the word rigor, which I guess is quite pejorative in this context, I think you're right, there are dangers, because there are differences. It was interesting yesterday when you were asked about intention, and you said, well, you actually strive to avoid closure around the intention or the purpose of a piece of art. You always try to keep things open, which is to say, in a sense, you strive for ambiguity or completely open translations or interpretations. And I think that is something in the scientific community where your methodology would actually want to avoid that. You would want probably closure. So, there are differences which aren't sort of pejorative. They're good, substantial reasons for methodological difference. So there are some risks, but of course there are some gains as well. And,
I think that your representation is a certain example, and I dare to use it, because my impression with your presentation was nicer than any other things. And it doesn't even matter why. The point is that when I ask something, it was obvious that you are aware that there are deeper questions about the meaning of music and whether this can be transmitted and reproduced by computer. Yet I'm sure that when you speak to generic audiences, if you want to get their attention and admiration, that is their thing. It's just to play an artificially generated thing, which is relatively trivial. So this is the kind of situation which is dangerous, because naturally you have to get deeper into your own way of understanding something deeper, but by having a too wide audience, you might be pushed into doing something else.
Yeah, but I mean, frankly, to the day, I mean, I don't care. I don't care what people understood. I mean, as long as I am paid for continuing to research and push my personal obsessions as far as I can, that's fine. So of course, when I try to talk, it's better when people understand what I mean. It's more interesting for everybody. But in some sense, it's not the goal. I mean, the goal is and also what you said about openness. I mean, I don't. We have this strange model that we always have to be open and creative, and we all have to become again babies who are so creative and so open. Of course, I mean, Alan Kay said something very interesting about children and babies. He said they are extremely creative, more than us, but they never create anything interesting. So there's this, it really, when he said never, it's really never. So it does never occur. So there's this idea of being open, which is useful for learning, for many things. And there is the opposite model that we have to be closed, not closed or in the sense of reductionist, but also obsessed. I mean, focused and obsessed in the worst sense of the term, and sometimes, I mean, always something interesting comes because, some guys have been obsessed by years, and most of them, they are obsessed by things which are not worth being obsessed about. But sometimes something, so this idea of being open is of course, it's better to raise money to say that you want to be open and but I mean, frankly, yeah, let's be open, let's be very close also. And,
what you are saying is that, let me put it this way, in the moment that you chose your obsession, you were open.
Yes,
after you chose that,
I try to be open.
No, not only that. I mean, definitely, this is probably very common to any kind of sustained effort